Hello and welcome to another This is the Music podcast. This week we are joined by Jason from Salford band The Electric Stars, who back in February of this year released their second album, Velvet Elvis, the only lover left alive. Jason, thanks very much for coming on and having a chat with us today. How are you doing?
I'm okay, mate. Yeah, I'm all right. Just trying to avoid the rain in Manchester, but hey, no change there.
Yeah, I've obviously know that very well. The rain in Manchester, and it's definitely been raining down here today on and off. So I share the pain.
Oh, it's horrendous outside, Mark. It's hailstone.
Oh wow, we haven't had that
hailstone
yet.
In May.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? So obviously, as I just mentioned there, we're here to discuss the album Velvet Elvis, and which is a brilliant album, and obviously all things Electric Stars. The album is sort of effectively a concept album, isn't it, of a frontman telling his story, being in a band, and the highs and lows sort of associated with that. So where did you get the inspiration for the album, and as well the artwork there, which hopefully everyone will be able to see the front cover of?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll talk about the kind of idea behind it. And when the Electric Stars first formed, which is it's actually 10 years ago now, we evolved out of the studio. We came from one or two other bands in the local area. Myself and Keith have been with each other a long time. Keith is the bass player. Andy on guitar had been jamming with us for a few years, but we'd not really had a lineup that we were happy with. And we went into the studio as a three-piece with no drummer. We had a session drummer and no rhythm guitarist. By the time we'd come out of the studio, we'd finished an album. We'd managed to find ourselves a drummer and a rhythm guitarist arrived. The name of the band arrived, and we finished this album called Sonic Candy Soul.
Yeah.
Within Sonic Candy Soul was already the sort of like the beginnings of the story of this singer in a band, which was, and listen, there's a lot of autobiographical images that are in both albums, I'd say, mainly because of the way I write. I write with a combination of observations and things that are within me and my influences. The influences are very easy to spot. You know, we're a rock and roll band. We generate a lot of our vibes and ideas from the late 60s, early 70s. That's no secret. So the first album kind of pointed the way towards not only the way the band sounded and looked and who our influences were, but if anything, it gave us a route into what would become the next album. So Velvet Elvis, The Only Lover Left Alive, has been written for a long time. It only came out 5 months ago, but it was ready to come out quite a few years ago. With one thing and another, we didn't get it done. Pandemic was just one of the things that slowed it down in the end. And it arrived just after Christmas. So I think that concept, the story, has been there for quite a few years. It's definitely come from the first album, but there's a lot of stuff in that story about Velvet Elvis that comes from not just our band, Mark, but you know, all the great rock and roll bands. There's a little bit of Jagger in there. There's a little bit of Morrison. There's a little bit of Iggy Pop and David Bowie. There's a lot of the Electric Stars in that as well. So it's a melting pot, which is exactly what the band are about and exactly what the first album was about. But this melting pot has got a story from track 1 all the way to track 12. As for the artwork, I've mentioned this a few times now, but Disraeli Gears by Cream is one of my favourite albums, not only in terms of the sonic sound of it, but also the visuals. I'm a big fan of Arthur Lee and Love, always have been. I wanted to try and combine those two classic albums from that sort of late 60s period, so hence the colours and the faces. And the guy that did it for us, a guy called Ben Emery, he only really needed a little bit of guidance. Basically said, look, these are the two albums we're looking at. Can you? And he said, let me have a go. And he had a go, and we looked at it, and wow, straight away he's got it. So we let him roll with his original idea. and that turned into the front cover. But everything else in the booklet is pretty much the story that we've tried to tell in visuals, images, alongside little quotes from the songs, you know. We didn't want people to get lost, Mark, because I know you use the word concept album, and I've used it myself. Sometimes I've used that word reluctantly. I tend to use the word story, but I'm okay with it now. I've kind of learned to live with the fact, yeah, okay, it's a concept album. But the concept, the story, is quite a colourful visual story. There's a lot of ups in it, there's a lot of downs in it, and it's all about survival and managing to find a way through these impossible odds of fame, glamour, sex, drugs, lots of rock and roll, and then more of the same again and again and again, with the spotlight of the media on top of you. And a lot of these heroes of ours, they don't survive. Jim Morrison didn't survive. Jimi Hendrix didn't get through. Brian Jones didn't make it. It's endless, isn't it? Kurt Cobain, endless amount of great rock stars who didn't get through it all. So that was the idea of the tale, you know. Of course, our guy does get through it all. He realizes there's something at the end of it, and it's not copious amounts of drugs and sex and so on. It's the music that gets him through. So that's pretty much the artwork and the story of the album, you know. But we as a band, we've done a lot in between album 1 and album 2. It's just that, unfortunately, the stuff that we did in between, we should have really done after album 2. We ended up doing all sorts of stuff, you know. However, we are where we are, and I'm pleased to tell you now that album number 3 has already been written, and we've already started to record it.
Oh wow! So, right.
Yeah, we're moving now with a little bit of speed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's great news to hear. So, you kind of have touched a little bit there on the recording process. Sorry, the recording of the album, I should say. So, where did you do it? And obviously, with the pandemic and stuff, was it? Did you manage to get down to the studio? How did that work?
Well, I mean, listen, COVID has made a mess of pretty much everything and everyone, really, worldwide. I don't think anyone's escaped from it. However, there's a few songs from the album that did come out earlier, in terms of The Only Lover Left Alive and Loaded with Regrets came out as a CD single, followed by Sunshine with a B-side that's not on the album. And then We Love You came out as a download. And each time one of these came out, it was supposed to be us announcing the album's coming, and then something got in the way. So we had all those attempts to record the rest of the songs and failed miserably. Anyway, when we got around to the lockdown period, we'd nearly finished the album. So we had to wait for a while until we could move around again. But when we did get that chance, we were back into the studio to finish off the album. The first 4 songs that I mentioned there were recorded in Vibe Studios in Manchester, which is owned by Martin Coogan. Martin, of course, from the Mock Turtles. And it's a great studio. But our guitarist, Andy, has now built his own studio, which I've got to say, Mark, is fantastic. Yeah. So the other 8 tracks on the album have been recorded in Andy's studio, which is kind of like an extension at the back of his house, you know?
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Wow. It's a great, really good little backstory there with, you know, different places that you've been, obviously to Martin's studio and obviously to Andy's as well. So, track 1, Velvet Elvis. You've just gone straight in there straight away. It's obviously a 9-minute track in total, a real musical odyssey, which I personally absolutely love. It's bold and sort of captures sort of in terms of the album's sound, you know, the different genres that it goes through, sort of, or is almost covered in sort of that one song, if you like. Is that a fair reflection, would you say, or?
I think that's pretty spot on, to be honest, Mark. I remember when we first spoke about not just recording that song, but when we spoke about the album, I was very adamant that this album had to be bold because it was telling a story about a very flamboyant rock and roll star who was full of colour and energy There was a lot of sex in this story and in this guy. So you can't come in there, kind of like apologizing with the music and the look. So the whole thing has got to puff its chest out from that first note right to the last part of the song. So someone else actually did a review and said it was quite brave of them to start with like this little organ on its own. And I wanted that to be almost like a church-like organ, because for me, rock and roll is a religion. And this is quite a religious experience, this album. The highs and lows that not only he experiences, but the fans who follow him and follow his band, they love him, they worship him. So it's almost like going to church is going to see the band, saying your prayers is putting the music on. And I know that people like us, music fans who just love rock and roll music, we probably spend more time thinking about rock and roll than we do thinking about religion anyway. It's just the way we're made. So I wanted this album to be a religious experience. So that sort of church-like organ not only brings in the album, but it brings in this character who is almost elevated to the point of being a messiah to these fans. And one or two people have pointed out that there's elements of maybe Tommy by The Who in terms of the character there being quite almost like a biblical kind of character. Mm-hmm. You don't envision these things when you're writing. When I was writing about Velvet Elvis, it was just about a rock and roll star. But as the story took shape, I injected more truth into the character from my own experience. And I also injected more almost like truths from other rock and roll bands that I admire.
Yeah.
When I put it all together and looked at it, I thought, if we can pull this off, this is going to be brave, it's going to be bold, it's going to be colourful, and it's going to be pretty big. So you're right, that first track has to announce the character, the album and the band with a real punch, So yeah, spot on. There's a lot in that first song,
Yeah, definitely. I think you just said there, he's very bold to go in like that. But as I say, I love it, and I think it really does sort of set the tone and really set you up for the story and for the journey that you're going to be going along across the album. So one of the things that is evident throughout all the songs are the catchy lyrics, particularly the choruses, and I think that's really demonstrated on Electric Stardust. Is that something that you've always tried to achieve when writing your songs?
Yeah, definitely, Mark. We often have this discussion in the band, when we're working, and I don't want it to sound pompous at all, but we always set our sights as high as possible. So for me, when I look at bands to aspire to and singers that I look up to, I don't look up to people who are okay. I look up to the best, So when we're talking about guitars and guitar work, we're talking about Jimmy Page and Clapton and Hendrix and Jeff Beck and Keith Richards. When we're talking about bands, we're talking about the biggest and the greatest and the most influential bands of all time. And songwriting, for me, you have to try your best to write not only a song that appeals to other people, because what's the point in releasing something if people aren't going to like it? I don't get that. You have to have that in mind. If people are going to support you and follow you and spend money to go and see you play live, let alone spend money on your records, they're going to want to buy quality. They don't want to buy a song that sounds like it's a demo by a pub band, So for me, Mark, it's all about, if a song's coming through and it's not good enough, it goes in the bin. Yeah. So the only songs that get presented to the band are songs that I think the band are going to go, yeah, that's up to scratch, and then we'll work on it and we'll finish it.
Sure.
So with Stardust, it's a song like one or two others of ours that have been kicking around a while. We know that they're good songs, but they never quite finish the journey because there's something not right, and we pull it back again. We work on it, pull it back again. That one was definitely going to be on this album. The trick for me was, can we make it sound like a combination of the Monkees and the Byrds with a tiny little bit of Bowie thrown in. Well, we did.
Yeah.
When we got that right, then we knew, do you know what? Now it's right. Now it can be released. So aim for the stars, Mark, with your songwriting, always, because I think if you start accepting things that are not good, not catchy, don't have any meaning or substance, then that's the road to downtown, you know.
Yeah, definitely, sure. And just on Electric Stardust, I like the Indian style outro that you've got there, sort of the last 20 seconds or so of the track. And obviously throughout some of the songs, and you sort of touched on it a little bit before, is there are some religious references in the lyrics and stuff. Would you say that you're a spiritual person, or is that just purely and simply a coincidence as
no, I am. There's no doubt about it. I'm not one of these people that doesn't believe there's nothing upstairs. There's something there. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to preach to anyone, because you know what I believe is probably a combination of a lot of different things. However, I do believe that you can get into a state where something higher than yourself can guide you and help you along. For me, at this moment in my life, it's probably just music, and music in its purest form. For rock and roll music, for me, the little section that you mentioned there, with that almost like Indian mantra, harks back to the first album. There's a track on the first album called Isolation, and the outro of the song is beautiful music for beautiful people. And this is the beginnings of the mantra of the Electric Stars. Again, it might sound a bit up its own ass, but the idea of that is, if you listen to the beautiful music that we give you, then you become part of the beautiful people. It's that gang mentality, but the melody of beautiful music for beautiful people appears at the end of Stardust, played on a sitar. So it's the same melody. So it harks back to that mantra, which is, I suppose, it's a little bit George Harrison. It's a little bit of a almost like a Hare Krishna piece of repeated mantra. It often appears when we play live, because we'll play that part on its own live, and we'll get people singing beautiful music for beautiful people. It is what it is, but it's one of those things that, again, in the first album, it was obviously going to reappear elsewhere. And Velvet Elvis, as a character, took Sonic Candy Soul and everything with it and dragged it to this higher plane. So yes, well spotted, but that's what it's about. It is quite a spiritual piece, but what it's trying to say is, this is beautiful music for beautiful people. Still.
Sure, brilliant. I really like that answer. That's a great answer. So, Pop Star, which is one of my personal highlights from the album. There's quite a few different influences on there. You've got a soundtrack of our lives. I think there's a bit of Primal Scream in there, and without the obvious comparison of obviously from where you're from up there in Salford, Manchester, of the artists. So would it be fair to say that particular song, is it sort of having a bit of a pop at sort of today's, reality TV, culture that in my opinion sadly exists today?
There's two sides to that song. First of all, the story of the character. Obviously, Velvet Elvis and his band are extremely successful. He's beginning to get involved in the trappings, the sex, the drugs, the media, but he's also now looking at the industry from a different point of view, because before he was looking in as a young outsider. Now he's a big rock and roll star, and he's looking down at the industry, and he's looking down at his alleged competition. And yes, you're right, it is a pop. I don't know whether you watched the Brit Awards the other night. I did.
I missed it.
Well, you did well to miss it, but I did watch it, and I sat there agog for pretty much 2 hours. There was virtually no guitar bands on whatsoever. And listen, hey, if there's no good guitar music out there, then fair enough. But you and I both know that there are good guitar bands out there. But the Brit Awards now has turned into a backslapping exercise for pop puppets who are fed to us on Saturday nights with programs like X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, The Voice, you name it. Every country's got their own version of these shows now. You also know, like I do, that the biggest amount of industry budget is spent on pop stars and not rock and roll bands, not songwriting artists as such. You look at some of these alleged stars on the TV, and they have a writing team of 3, 4, sometimes 5 people who will write with them. They probably don't play an instrument. They might play a bit of piano, but 9 times out of 10, everything is done for them. They are choreographed. They're dressed with the best fashion designers. The videos cost £250,000, and they're surrounded by people who do exactly what the label wants. So it's a dig at the industry of today, but from Velvet Elvis's perspective, he's looking down at the industry and he's saying, surely this is what it's about, not that. For us and where we are in 2021, it's it's definitely a shot across the bows as to what we're all subjected to, which is quite sad,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree with everything there that you said. And as you say, if there's no sort of guitar bands about, then obviously totally understand if they're not, up for an award or not been asked to play or whatever at the Brits. But obviously, as you've already said, we both know that that's not true. So it was
bizarre, Mark.
Yeah,
because it was really strange, because even in the nominations, there were no young bands really. I mean, there was some good singers, 1 or 2 good songs in there, and there's some people who've been around for quite a while, and I get that, and that's fine. However, I just found it very, very safe, very, very nice. There didn't seem to be any danger in there. There didn't seem to be anyone who was saying anything apart from the obvious, thanking the NHS and being politically correct. And that's fine, but there was no edge to it at all. And for me, the best music is always music that is challenging. It has a voice, it's got something to say, but there's an edge to it, There was no edge to anything that I saw last night. It was pretty dull. So you're right, pop star, it's boom.
Exactly, and that's exactly how it should be. So I'm going to talk about Suicide Man, which seems to be quite poignant this week, because obviously it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and the song sort of has quite a deep meaning to it. Where did you get the inspiration from this song? I mean, obviously we've just mentioned there about Velvet Elvis with the pop star song that he's got to the right to the top and sort of almost looking out now at the industry. Is that sort of was that where the thought process came for that, or?
Yeah. In respect to the story, what happens is he is now a big pop star, a big rock star, etc. And he's taking a lot of drugs, and he's in and out of rehab. And of course, like the rock and roll press are, or used to be when we had decent rock and roll, they're assuming that it's a suicide attempt, and it's not. It's probably just the rock star enjoying himself a bit too much. However, there's an observational side to it as well that says, listen, irrespective of what it is that's getting to you, whether it's some kind of an addiction, or whether it's problems at home, or whether it's you've blown all your money and you think you're disappearing down the plug hole, whatever it is, there are people out there who are very, very close to pulling the plug, and that's serious. Within the context of the story, it's not like that. It's more or less one of these rock star in rehab type things, because he doesn't actually do it. He doesn't commit suicide. But I suppose when I was a kid, people didn't really talk about stuff, Mark. There was no real campaigns for mental health, or talk to people and stuff like that. If you had a problem, you kind of kept it to yourself. So I suppose it's something that's emerged in the last few years, which is right, and it's the right way to do things. 1 or 2 people have got in touch with me and said, listen, that song means more to me because of what's happened in my family, etc. tricky to talk about, because it's very, very real. It happens. You only have to look at Caroline Flack not so long ago, and she was quite famous, very, very well known. The media, the pressures, and all of a sudden, a talented, successful young woman's gone. So if there's anything in there that kind of makes people listen a little bit more and take notice, then that's great. But in the context of the story, it's more about rock and roll star flirting too much with the dark side, and he ends up going in and out of rehabs until eventually he cleans himself up,
Yeah, sure. And that fits in, as you say, that fits in really well, doesn't it, with what's gone on up to that point and before in this album. So
yeah.
Everything Everyone, I think it obviously this album is a sort of a anyway is sort of pushing ground, I think, anyway, with the ideas and the different, like, fusing the different genres of and styles of music together. But one of the things that I really noticed on here that I think pushes the ground quite noticeably is that you've obviously got an organ solo in there. So where did the idea come from first of all getting an organ into one of the songs, and going even further with it and having it as like a solo effectively in the song?
I've always been a massive Brian Wilson fan. The Beach Boys for me are one of those bands that really, really push things in terms of not only the songwriting, but the harmonies, the feel, the texture. It's very difficult to listen to the Beach Boys and not see Sunshine. Really difficult. No matter what they're doing, they just have sunshine and summer in their sound. Mm-hmm. The song Everything Everyone is about meeting a girl. So basically he cleans himself up, comes out of rehab, and the clean Velvet Elvis gets on a Greyhound bus in California to relax, and he goes and falls in love. He meets a girl. So it's about that ride along that coastal highway on a Greyhound bus, and he spots the girl and instantly he falls in love. But because of where it's supposed to be set, it needed to sound right. And for me, if you're driving along the coast of California, you're listening to the Beach Boys. So we had to make Everything Everyone sound very Brian Wilson-esque. And that's what we aimed for. Andy, who is obviously our guitarist, he's become, now he's got his studio, he's become more of an instrumentalist, I'd say now. Plays a lot of piano. He's playing 12-string, he's playing flamenco guitar, and he's also playing Hammond organ as well. So on that particular track, we listened to a lot of Brian Wilson, Sunflower, Surf's Up, great albums. And Andy played all the Hammond parts on it, which is just tremendous,
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. It's he's done a fantastic job, and I think how you've just explained it sort of bringing now to me, I can understand it a little bit more, and it really brings really brings home and hits home, what you were trying to capture, and I think that you've definitely achieved that on that song. Exactly.
It's tricky, really, because without telling people exactly what goes on in the story, there's a lot of areas where you have to use your own imagination. And I'm not too sure whether I've actually said to anybody since the album came out, he's supposed to be on a Greyhound bus on the coast of California meeting a girl. So there might be other people who hear and feel different things with that song, but that was the intention, to make you feel like you're looking out the window at the sunshine and the surf, and then all of a sudden you look across the aisle and there she is. That's the kind of vibe, that we were after.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's quite important there, what actually you've just said about, you might say one thing, or that makes it, or about the album, or it makes you feel a certain way, but then I might have something completely different. And I think that's quite good, especially on this album, because there's such a story going on. A lot of the times with albums, it's just 10 tracks, bang, there you go, and they don't necessarily always flow. I think that's one of the good things about the about bringing other bands into it too much. But like with the Coral, I don't know if you've heard their latest album, but obviously they've gone for not a kind of like the similar sort of a similar story to what you've done yourself with the theme, with with how that's worked, and it's really good actually to see how obviously with yourselves how hard you've actually worked to try and get that story out there and to get the songs together and make them all all the tracks flow exactly how you want them to tell this story of Velvet Elvis.
Yeah, I'm going to get the new Coral album. I've not got it yet, but I keep promising myself that at some point I'm going to go to a record shop that's open. So I'm hoping that's going to be sometime soon. Maybe weekend. I'll get along to HMV. I don't know, but Coral are a great band. I've got to say, I've always been a fan. I remember when they first signed to Delta Sonic, Coral, and they did some great stuff. They've always had a very good understanding of the past and be able to drag it into now with the way they write the songs.
Yeah,
they're a top band, the Coral, for sure. So I'll be getting that album.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. But if you are going to record shops, make sure you pick this one up first. So, Precious for me is probably as a southerner is the most Mancunian sounding song on this album, and I feel that it's quite inspired a little bit by the Charlatans because of the piano playing that's in it, and the guitar riff sort of halfway through the song. The lyrics sound really positive for me. Is that a fair reflection of the song?
Absolutely, yeah. And you're right again with the sound. We wanted a little bit of that sort of like, not so much Britpop sound, but we wanted it to sound like a very, very groovy English dance band, because the idea of the song is he's met the girl and he's now with the girl and he's looking at her with very innocent eyes. And it's almost like she's a little bit quirky, the way she dresses, the way she dances. And he's chatting to her sister, he's saying, look, she's off her head, this girl, but I'm totally in love with her. She's precious, she's a gem, That's the idea of the song. But at the same time, we wanted to convey that feeling of when you do fall in love and you want to be out and you want to party and you want to dance together, you want to be together, you want to go to the movie, you want to do everything together, And that was the kind of feel we wanted, that sort of happy, dancey vibe, which was very much reminiscent of Hacienda days when everybody was just having a real good loving. So it was kind of that idea. So it sounds a little bit Charlatans, sounds a little bit Primal Scream. Having said that, Charlatans and Primal Scream do sound very much like Stones, from about 71, 72.
Yeah.
So it all harks back to where we're from musically anyway. So even though it sounds a little bit sort of like Mancunian dance Hacienda Charlatans, really, I was listening to a lot of, for instance, the soundtrack to Performance. I don't know whether you're familiar, but Performance, the film with Mick Jagger from 68. The soundtrack to that is absolutely phenomenal. And there's a song on it called Memo and Turner. And Turner is Jagger's character in the film. And the bottleneck guitar on that and the groove is just outstanding. Check it out, Mark. It's a wonderful film. It's on the edge, with everything it does, it's on the edge. But the soundtrack is just awesome.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm definitely going to get that checked out, and people listening as well. Let us know your thoughts on the film as well if you get around to watching it as well. So that brings us to one of the songs called "The Only Lover Left Alive," which is obviously sort of part of the album's title. I feel that it's got a great energy running through the song, and it's a real sort of like rock and roll style with the sound and stuff like that. And I sort of like feel that maybe a Ray Davies or maybe a Steve Marriott could have written this one. And I absolutely loved the guitar riff that goes on throughout the song. So when you're writing songs, do you ever compare it to sort of like the greats and go, that's as good as anything that they've written, or are you a little bit more humble than that?
You aim for that, Mark. I would never sit there and compare anything we've ever done to. Listen, I think Ray Davies is one of the greatest songwriters that we've ever had in this country. Yeah. I think his lyrics are just off the scale. Marriott, probably one of the greatest voices we've ever had in this country. So no, I'd never set anything we do along with our influences, but we always aim in that direction, always. And you're right, the song itself is very powerful. The character at this point in the story is now back on hard drugs. So this song is basically about sex fueled by drugs. So he's kind of, the relationship with the girl now is taking a very dark turn, because he's on too many class A's, and it's getting a bit dark, the relationship. And what he's involved in now with her it's pretty rough and it's very, very, very sexual now, and he's almost lost the romance side of things because he's back on the hard stuff, you know. He's going back to his Jim Morrison phase, should we say? Which is not good for the relationship, really, is it?
No, definitely not. So, sort of almost carrying on from that last song there, what you were saying, we'll obviously go on to Loaded with Regrets, and that really brings the pace of the album down, and almost really, I think you've kind of like already hit the nail on the head that this song sort of it's looking back on the relationship, lost love, and obviously like rock and roll excess and all that sort of stuff. Would you say, is this song like sort of semi-autobiographical at all in any way, or is it just like for you, or is it just almost like the continuation of the story for our hero?
Yeah, well, it's both, because from his point of view, because of what happened in The Only Lover Left Alive, which is total excess, he loses the girl because of his attitude and his performance in the relationship. She basically says, I've had enough, see you. So she drops him. He's now on his own, and of course he's awash with guilt, and he realizes that yet again he's made a mess of things. But from my point of view, I mean, tell me who hasn't lost someone in a relationship and you think that your world has ended, because usually the first time it happens to you, when you're in love and it breaks down, is when it hurts the most. So you try and remember those thoughts and feelings. So you kind of, I drew back on that, and used that real life experience. And it's definitely a song that means a lot to me, but then they all do. However, it fits perfectly into the story. I think one of the things that I'm most proud of, and I think the rest of the band are as well, is that if you pluck any one of the songs out of the 12 and you play them, they stand up as being either a good rock song, a good dance song, a good love song, whatever it might be. But when you slot them back in again, they instantly become part of the story. Loaded with Regrets is a ballad, a very heart-wrenching ballad, like all those great ballads are, but when you slot it back in, it's not just an album track. It totally works with what he's gone and done to himself by acting in such a crazy way yet again,
Yeah, sure, totally. So, sorry, I Left My Soul Out in the Rain. This song, again, sort of breaks ground and goes into a slightly different direction to some of the other songs. You've got a choir that's featuring on the album, on that song. Is that something that you've always aimed, or that you've always wanted to try and do, is to get a choir on a song? And how did you go about getting them involved?
We did it on the first album. There was a song called Blind on the first album where we managed to get girl voices on that song, and it worked really well. And then one of those projects that came along that stopped us from finishing the album was a tribute to George Best. And we had a 2-track CD, and the B-side was called Georgie the Brightest Star, and we had a choir on that as well. So we've done it before. Listen, I'm a big fan of anything that takes a song to a new level, whatever that might be. Sometimes it's something quite simple like a guitar solo. Other times it's more voices. And we mentioned Brian Wilson before and what he did with the Beach Boys. I'm also a really big fan of female voices mixed with guys' voices. I think a lot of what I like in music has that crescendo. Again, it's that spiritual feel, that choral feel, almost like the church choir.
Yeah.
This song in particular is when the main character realizes that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, because the song starts, and in truth, when the song starts, he's sat there with a needle hanging out of his arm, and he's at the lowest point. And there's kind of like a little segue track called Whatever's at the Bottom is Holding You Up, and it's a vicious guitar and vocal part. It's really violent, and it's almost like he hits the floor and there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Because you're at the bottom. So you're literally a rhino's eyelash away from disappearing, or something's got to drag you back up. I Left My Soul Out in the Rain is the point where he realizes, I'm not going down. This is the bottom, and now I'm going to start looking up. So towards the end of the song, when the girl's voices come in and he's stepping into the light, that's when he realizes that something's opening up in front of him. Yeah. At that point, he doesn't know what it is. He just knows that he's not going back there anymore. No matter what he's been through, something is dragging him forward, and the momentum carries him through. So that's the point when he kind of grabs onto hope, you know.
Yeah, sure. And I think, obviously, as we said throughout this album, that then takes us on quite nicely to We Love You, because we've got the low of the song we've just been speaking about, and now we're sort of getting back up to a high, because as I say, We Love You for me is an out and out rock and roll banger. I love the build up of the guitars at the beginning of the song, and I guess really it's almost, for me, it's almost saying that, well, Velvet Elvis has got his mojo back, I guess, effectively. So kind of like, what was the inspiration behind this track in terms of the sound and sort of like fitting in with the story?
When he realizes that there's something else there, he's not quite sure what it is. And We Love You is all about the obsession of the rock and roll star. So lyrically, it's saying, we want to be like you. Every movement, every moment, we want to be like you. We love you, you know. Yeah. He then realizes what it is he joined a band for. And it's not the sex, and it's not the drugs, and it's not the money and the cars. He joined a band because he loves rock and roll music. Yeah. So on stage, when he stood there and he's looking at all these people and they're singing every word and they're miming every movement that he does, to them, he's their hero. And that's the motivation that basically tells him, I know what it is now. It's not all the other stuff. I've tried all the other stuff. It's all right. But you know what? This is what I want. So that's why that song feels like a live gig, feels like a performance, because it's meant to give you that euphoria of being on stage, or if you're a fan, being at the gig. And it's that experience between the fan and the rock and roll star, or whether it's people and their religion, whatever it might be. It's that experience of togetherness and everybody going to the, to the gig to experience music or listening to the song. It fills him with the energy that he needs then. So that's when the light at the end of the tunnel becomes really bright for him. Yeah, sure, Todd. I think that's you've summed that up absolutely brilliantly there for me, and I think that's a good, as I say, great summary on that particular song, and obviously where he is at that particular moment in his life. So that then takes us on to the last song on the album, which is called Impossible Odds, Rock and Roll Save Me.
I feel that it's a sort of quite a classic sort of album closer. It's got the good tempo to the song, but it also captures again a bit like first track, captures the spirit and the music of the album again all in one. Was that always sort of the intention for the last song of the album to sort of finish in the way that it's finished?
Yeah, very similar to the first song, which kind of paints a picture as you go into it.
Yeah.
The last song lyrically is saying, you know what, those previous 11 songs have been a right roller coaster. However, no matter how impossible it's been, I've got through it. Yeah. I've got through it. I'm fine. I'm calm. This is me. It's been tough, but I'm through it, and I'm going to survive. The bit at the end, "Rock and Roll Save Me," is a little bit cute because there's 12 lines in that song, and every line comes from the 12 songs. Yeah. So the first line is from track 1, and so on all the way through to the final line, which is from track 12. It's like the album in 2 minutes as opposed to an hour. You know, yeah. It tells, "Rock and Roll Save Me" tells a story, but it's just taken lines from each song and put it together to give you that outro of "Rock and Roll Save Me," and that's really what the whole story is about. Yeah. You know, as far as rock stars are concerned, you will experience all those things and more, and some people get through it and some people don't. It might ruin you as a person. It might just ruin the band. Some bands break up and form other bands. It might push you all the way and we might never see you again, or you might just keep your head straight and survive the whole thing. And listen, my favorite band, my biggest influence is Stones. Yeah. And the Stones have now been rocking and rolling almost 60 years. And they were probably the band that everybody said they're going to last 10 minutes. They've only lost one of the guys. They only lost Brian Jones. The rest of them are still kicking and screaming. I do not know how, but they're a great example of a band that didn't fall down the plug hole. They carried on producing, playing bigger gigs and producing. They've got a new album that's coming out anytime now, and they're going to try and go and do another tour when we can again, you know. Yeah. And like I say, it's 60 years. So they're a great example of a band that's been through everything and found a way to survive through all those impossible odds, you know. Yeah. And that's really what it's about, Mark, you know, fictional characters, but it's about rock and roll bands, rock and roll singers, rock and roll fans. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. So obviously you just touched on there the Stones with the touring and obviously now lockdown easing. So is the plan now for the Electric Stars, is it to get out and start touring the album? Or
yeah, we've got one gig booked in that we can confirm, and that's it. And it's the I think it's the 20th of November, and it's in Essex. I think that's the only thing we've got confirmed, because up until a few weeks ago, the landscape was still a bit wobbly, you know. Yeah. So we've got that confirmed. We've got a lot of people coming in and offering us gigs, but what most people are asking for is, can you play the whole album live? Yeah. And the answer simply at the moment is no, because we've not even been in a rehearsal room yet, you know.
Right, okay, yeah.
And the album was written and recorded in such a way that the band haven't really all been together. Sure. Yeah. So first of all, we're going to have to get in a rehearsal room and learn it as a band, which is an hour and 2 minutes of live entertainment. Yeah. Which will be more like a show, I would imagine, when we do it. You know, rather than just a selection of songs, it's more like a show. And then once we've done that, you know, get ready to gig it. So the first time we're going to do that is November.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It's a challenge.
And whereabouts in Essex is that gig?
Yeah, it's in Brentwood. It's a place called the Brentwood Arms, which is one of those classic rock and roll venues where it's kind of like at the back of a pub.
Yeah.
Which is where a lot of these great venues started from, like the Half Moon in Putney.
Yeah.
We've got a place in Manchester called the Witchwood. That's at the back of a pub, but they kind of evolved into venues, as the years go by. And it's a great venue. It's run by a guy who has had us on there. I think we've been there twice before now. So it's a fantastic venue. That's the first and only thing we've got booked in, but there will be more, I'm sure. Yeah. Whether they arrive before November, I don't know. We'll see how the land lies. Now that we're kind of coming out of the closet, as you would say,
I think as part of the reason I was asking there about whereabouts in Essex it was because that's where I live. So
right, okay.
And Brentwood's not too far from me, so I'll have to look up, get the ticket link sorted out, and try and come down and catch you live for that. And
I'll speak to you when we finished and let you know exactly where it is, Mark. It's a great venue. You'll love it.
Brilliant. I look forward to that. So I guess we've obviously sort of kind of touched on it a couple. You've said there about you've got a gig not in the not too distant future, and you did say as well earlier on that you've got a third album sort of basically in the bag. So I guess that they're the next sort of things that are in the future for the band. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I mean the third album, bizarrely, it took us virtually 10 years to complete album number 2. Album number 3 was written while we were mixing and mastering this one. So it came out in I think it was like December, January when Velvet Elvis actually came out and people got the CD. This one was virtually finished while the CDs were being posted, and over the last few months it's been finished now. So we've got a full track listing. We've already recorded one song. There's 10 songs on it, and I'm very excited about the project because the project is going to be very different to what we've done before. Sonic Candy Soul was a rock and roll album. Velvet Elvis was basically a concept album or a story. We've always had good artwork with both albums. However, this one is going to be very different. The packaging is going to be completely different to what we've done before. We're working with a very good friend of ours who runs his own art. I'm going to say it's an emporium because what he does is amazing. It's called Figment Art. And he's a great lad, James. We're working with him to wrap up this album in such a way that it will look completely different to anything we've ever done before, certainly. Yeah. So it's quite a challenge. It's very brave. But when it does come out, there's going to be something extra special that comes with it, which I can't quite tell you yet, because even though I know what it's going to be, we've still got to confirm a few things. Yeah. But it will be coming out with something else. What I can tell you is I'm obsessed with the combinations of art. So I love fashion, I love art, poetry, music, I love film, video. So I want to be really, really creative with this third album. When it comes out, I want it to be, I wouldn't say a pop art experiment, but I want it to be more than just one form of art. I want it to contain visuals that are just as stunning as the music. And I want it to contain some written piece that will travel as well as all those 3 albums. So it will be an art package based around the Electric Stars.
Okay, brilliant. So, and on that note, unfortunately, that is the end of the podcast. Jason, thank you very much for coming on and talking about Velvet Elvis, The Only Lover Left Alive, and the Electric Stars, and obviously exactly where you all are with your future plans and everything. I've found this really this chat insightful, and I've loved the passion that you've got for this album and for music in general. And to borrow your quote that you used, that you gave me for the album review that we did, this album really is beautiful music for beautiful people. The album can be purchased from theelectricstars.com. and is available to download and stream in all of the usual places. The Electric Stars can be followed on their Facebook page. If you've downloaded this as a podcast, please click subscribe on your listening provider and tell all of your friends. Jason, thanks very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have, and hope to catch you again very soon and hopefully see you at the gig.
Listen, Mark, thank you for having us on and the support you've given us. I know you did a fantastic review for us a while ago, so much appreciated. I hope to see you at that gig maybe in November, and thanks for supporting New Original Music.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.